Oh, and we're live. Welcome back to AJC and the Web Devs with Peter Pistorius and special guest host Dev Agrawal. What's up, Peter? It's been a while.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me to AJC and the Web Devs. Are we the Web Devs?
Yes, all three of us collectively are the Web Devs, yes.
That's great. That's great. I'm proud to be a Web Dev. I'm doing really well. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to... Can I swear on this?
Of course, yeah.
I'm happy to shoot the shit here with you guys.
I love the streams where I get to shoot the shit, and you are someone that I love shooting the shit with, and you all are making a ton of content. You're doing talks, you're going on podcasts, and you haven't done that in say a couple years. So how's that been? You got on Syntax, probably the biggest podcast in the scene.
Wes is amazing, and I have watched that talk several times, and I have his intro stuck in my head. And it's always fascinating for me to watch other people introduce their own podcasts, because Wes goes, "Welcome to Syntax." So,
Yeah, no,
I like
great.
AJC and the Web Devs as well. Yeah, it's been really great creating new content. There's a lot of excitement around what we're building. And I'm happy to tell people about it.
Yeah. When did the name RedwoodSDK come into play?
So there was a lot of work that went into calling what we're building Redwood SDK. So for those of you that don't know, there was this original framework called RedwoodJS, and we decided to deprecate the entire framework, and we had to come up with something new. Originally, it was called, we were going to actually just take the name RedwoodJS for ourselves and then rename the older version to RedwoodJS Classic. And I actually saw that Remix is referred to their thing as Classic. I went through the
they ripped
motions
us off. Yes.
No.
It's just funny because Ryan Florence particularly has accused 3 other frameworks of ripping Remix off. So it's a joke. I would never do it to anyone else but to him because he deserves it.
So I think there's always a natural thought process when things like this happen. But essentially, we wanted to keep the name Redwood because deep down, we are still the exact same. We have the same ideas that we were putting forth with the original framework. And we have an amazing community. And I think we have some traction, a little bit of traction with the name already. And it has its association to Tom and David Price and Rob Cameron. And I wanted to honor that
and me.
And you and everyone, the community that we had is fantastic. So what I wanted to do was honor that and give it a good go and figure out what we needed to do to be compelling to developers today and figure out growth and really build something that feels amazing.
Awesome.
That's cool.
I am so stoked for this conversation. But
I just
before we get into too much, Dev should get a chance to introduce himself. But
sorry.
No, you're good.
Sorry, Dev, you go. I was going to say something,
which is to be expected. But Dev, you should give your quick spiel on Redwood and what you know about it.
Yeah, I mean, of course, as usual, happy to be here. Happy to be talking about Redwood. I just love JavaScript frameworks in general. I feel like I have the opposite of JavaScript fatigue, where most people are getting tired of JavaScript frameworks. I just get excited by them. I'm happy to see people putting effort into. Exactly.
You're like me in 2021.
Okay, does that mean I'm going to experience a crash in 3 more years?
It means you'll eventually hit a point where you need to ask yourself, do I want to keep doing this or do I want to actually just build something instead? But you can do both. You don't necessarily have to do one or the other. And I want to get back into actually talking about frameworks again. But continue.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, I'm trying to build at least one of my own as well. But yeah, it's just a fun landscape to be a part of. Just seeing how people approach building frameworks is such an interesting kind of task that people give themselves. You're basically you have to shape and formalize an opinion of how the web works, what's the best way to build on top of the web, and then kind of document and codify everything around it, ship it as a framework, and hope people are successful. So yeah, super excited for this conversation. Also, I just gave a talk today at Frontend Nation called Meet the Web Framework from the Future. Unfortunately, it was not about Redwood. It was about Handstack, which I'm super bullish on. So I think something that I'm going in today's conversation with is trying to figure out what Redwood is doing that's different from other frameworks, and what are the trade-offs there. Like, what are the things that you're doing better than anyone else? What are things that you could be doing better as, and just maybe what are things that I need to unlearn from other frameworks.
So Ben Patton has a comment here saying that he thinks this is a good opportunity for Redwood SDK to become a real JS option for Phoenix Live View, a canonical full stack framework that you could actually compare as a full stack framework, unlike most JavaScript frameworks. So I agree with that comment.
And, I just want to say that Tanner has been building his router and all the tools that he has for longer than Redwood has existed. And what he's built is amazing.
I think they started because he was building React Query when Redwood first started. And then he's gotten through this whole back-end journey. But Redwood's like 6 years old now. Yeah.
So I mean, there's a long tail of hard work that he's put into it, and I think it's really paying off now. And I just want to suffix that by saying that Redwood SDK is early, so we have a long journey ahead of us, and I'm here for that.
Yeah, Fuzzy. I don't know. I just used it, and it feels pretty solid to me because I think the fact that you're building it really heavily around Cloudflare, it brings it back to that feeling I had when it first just only really worked for Netlify, which was like really nice dev experience because you would just build it and then you deploy and it would just work. And then once we had 7 deployment providers, shit got really complicated.
Totally. Yeah. And one of the things that really started to tear it apart was the fact that we supported all these third-party authenticators and third-party hosting providers. And at the end of the day, we really couldn't we couldn't keep up with all the maintenance work that we had to do on all those packages. And it slowed down velocity. And, besides the fact that AWS's Lambdas did not live up to what we thought they would live up to. Yeah, unfortunately.
So we got a question here that only you will be able to answer. I came across a PR on GitHub yesterday where Redwood SDK and Waku is using Parcel RSC package in React repo to implement React Server Compose. So yeah, so is this true? How are we doing? We're using Vite, I thought, so we wouldn't be using Parcel, I don't think.
I don't think so. Yeah, no. I would be really interested to see where that PR is, but we're not using Parcel. Yeah, AWS is awful, and you need like a degree just to understand how to use their dashboards, and everything is a 3-letter acronym. Geez, like it's late here. Acronym. There we go.
Acronym. Yeah, no, totally. One thing that would have worked nicely would be like SST. And actually, now that's on Cloudflare, SST would still be able to work with Redwood because you don't have an infrastructure as code thing right now.
Well, we don't, but there is a really, really amazing project being built called Alchemy, alchemy.run. And
right. That is a similar thing for sure.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the work Sam Goodwin is doing with Alchemy.
Yeah, I've been seeing you guys talk about it on Twitter. It's pretty sweet.
And I think there's so much to unpack here. Maybe I can share my screen and then
at this point, let's get into some code.
Give a little more context about what Redwood SDK is, why we ended up calling it SDK. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Screen number 2. All right. So this is our homepage. This is the first one that we've shipped, and we're busy building a new one. But our tagline is, this could be the start of something small. And we have this nostalgic imagery based around like people introducing computers into their homes. I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s. That's when I was a teenager. And for me, there was all this really great print adverts based around people trying to convince you to get a computer in your house, because that wasn't a thing. And it was fascinating for me to see all these different companies have these like really great tongue-in-cheek adverts for putting PCs in your home. Actually, let me bring some of these up here if I can.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me see. We did a whole bunch of research around this.
I did see some of the stuff. Feel that you had on like cassette tapes or CDs or something.
Yeah. So these are some of the print ads that we were seeing in the world at that time. Like, I don't know why there are people in bikinis here, but they're like little kids, full of surprise. Like a, I don't know, cool accountant dude doing music.
So 80s.
Oh man, Bill Cosby. This one here, I actually recreated this using AI, and we just wanted to grab this vibe from the time when I was growing up, and we wanted to use that for our own brand. The reason why we did that was because I think that software is changing. I think software had to be written by experts, had to be written by people that knew how to code, and I think that that's becoming less and less true as we discover, the power of AI. What I'm seeing is that there are a bunch of technical people who maybe just understand computers really well, but don't necessarily have hardcore software skills. And they want to enter the conversation. They also want to build software to scratch their own itch. So we created sort of like this manifesto called Personal Software. And there's a video around this, which is over here, and you can watch it. Amy actually narrated it. But the idea is that you don't necessarily have to write software just to make money. You can write software that can solve a problem or scratch your own itch. And doing that, you can help your friends, your community, or even the small business that you work for, just by being helpful with software. And it doesn't have to have a brand. It doesn't have to have a monetization strategy or the ability to support it. All you really need to do is just solve a problem. So that's where this could be the start of something small. And we wanted to bring that idea to people again, because that's what it was like in the early days. You just wrote code for the hell of it. It wasn't about getting some VC funding, hyper growth, et cetera, et cetera. It was just about building software, one for the craft and two for solving people's problems.
Cool. Couple quick comments. I love that there is a lava lamp in the background of that image. Great shout out to Cloudflare.
Very intentional.
Yeah. I won one of these at React Rally.
Oh yeah! Wow.
Yeah, from the
Awesome.
Cloudflare booth. So it's been sitting next to me for a while now. And yeah, the idea of personal software, I think I was properly introduced to this idea last year thanks to Maggie Appleton and her talk at Local First about what was it? Home cooked software and barefoot developers.
Barefoot programmers. Yeah.
Barefoot programmers. Yes, amazing
barefoot
concept.
Developers.
And I love that people are, and especially framework authors are leaning into this. So big shout out.
Totally, it was a very big inspiration for us, and I've reached out to her and asked her if I could continue down the path of what she had very, very eloquently said. And she gave me the blessing.
Cite her, and I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah, I should probably cite her, but you're right.
Yeah, just say just put her name somewhere in there and link to this page. That's what you should do. But, that's cool because a lot of people would reference her when they talk about the digital garden. And I don't know if she came up with that term or if she popularized it, but I know that was a term people always associated with her as well. So she's just good at, she's like Swix in that regard,
What is a digital garden?
Digital garden is when your website is not something that you think of as you're selling a thing or that you're publishing really perfect set in stone content, but where you're kind of constantly iterating and building and changing and thinking of it more as just an iterative development experiment that you're always kind of just working on developing.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it's more like gardening. It's you're tending all these different things that's kind of growing over time instead of necessarily like building a structure piece by piece that like does a specific function. So I think that's kind of the meaning behind the term, which I always really liked.
Okay. And, the reason why we ended up calling it SDK was because when we built it, we actually didn't want to call it a framework because we felt like what we were building was a set of like really discrete components that were composable or functions that were composable. And we kind of explain it here exactly.
You bumped up the font up on this 2 times.
Oh, there we go. I'll make it giant.
Yeah,
Is that big?
Yeah.
So we resisted calling it a framework. What we wanted to do was call it a toolkit because we felt that what we were doing was not producing a framework. We were giving you these composable pieces that you could fit together and then, it felt like you own it because it's just Vite, a Vite plugin that gives you access to Workerd. And then Workerd has a React server, server-side rendering, React server components, and then we have a client-side hydration part. And then on top of that, we built a router that's super lightweight and super composable. And then we just handle request response. But after having spoken to a bunch of people, they were like, hey, remember Prisma? Prisma was trying to not call themselves an ORM for many years.
and eventually lost their minds about it. It's all they're like,
you are,
for 2 years.
You are an ORM. And they were like, no, we're not. Maybe that was a really good marketing strategy. And eventually they're like, okay, fine, we're an ORM. We are this thing. So we decided that we're just going to lean into that, use the thing that people understand, the term that people understand. And it's more helpful, right? Like if I said this is a toolkit for building web apps, I guess that makes sense. But if I just say it's a framework, you're like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I think it would be more confusing to say it's an SDK or a toolkit because SDK people usually associate with like a specific company that built an SDK that like gives a library to like work with their thing. Like obviously that's not the only definition of SDK, but we hear it a lot in that respect. And then toolkit, just the word tool, especially now that's being used in AI, the word tool can mean so many things. And it's not like it's really that different from the original Redwood framework. Like it doesn't have GraphQL, but it still has like kind of a clear separation between front and back end. It's still React based. It still gives you database and kind of a full end-to-end experience. So it's still a framework, but it's a framework where you made it easier to kind of swap in the parts.
Yeah. It feels incredibly composable. And a lot of people have described it as feeling invisible. So it feels like you're just writing the code that you want to care about. Trying to build the software that matters to you, and you're not fighting the framework or you're not thinking about the framework. It's invisible to your goals. So yeah,
I do think it's invisible in the sense that it feels invisible in terms of how it interfaces with Cloudflare. I think people if they've never used Cloudflare before, they will hit weird infrastructure things because there's a learning curve to Cloudflare itself and workers. And especially if you're going to do things like worker bindings to bring in D1 and R2, there's specifics to that. The good thing is Cloudflare has made a good job of creating like prompts and stuff. So you can use AI to kind of create it. So I was able to create an app within like an hour or two, probably, because I'd already used all this Cloudflare stuff. So I was just like, okay, the framework is just giving you, these workers, and then there's the front end, and then they're doing something with the router that I don't understand yet because I was just kind of vibe coding it. But it did feel invisible, but I don't think it would have felt invisible if I didn't have the prerequisite Cloudflare knowledge.
That's fair, because Cloudflare is a little bit of an odd duck, right? Like if you think of Cloudflare as a hosting provider and you compare it to other offerings, it's sort of like they give you all the parts and you compose them yourself. They're not, everything just isn't there. It feels way more configurable than what it would be if you were just using another hosting provider. Anthony, you built something with Redwood SDK. Do you want to share your screen?
You had a code project actually that you were going to show first. So
I do.
Yeah, I want to get more into your code first because I want to make sure that I understand what the actual conventions are correctly. So
okay.
So actually, Go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to frame that demo with sort of the principles that we put into building Redwood SDK. And I can also explain where these come from. So
yeah, we got all the time in the world, by the way. We got plenty of time, so feel free to explain at length anything.
Okay, cool. We built Redwood GraphQL, 4 or 5 years ago. And at the time, we were just entering, like getting to know what Babel could do and transpilation could do. And when you give someone a tool like that, they use it. So we use transpilation quite heavily. We introduced something that I call magic functions, which is an export on a file or a module that invokes some kind of like activity based on the framework. So a really clear example is a cell in Redwood SDK. A cell was a way to query your GraphQL endpoints, and you could define an export that was a loading status, an error status, a completed status, and then the query itself. So these were just exports that got shipped out of that file, that module, and you didn't actually have to connect the dots in your code. The transpiler would pick that up, and it would do it for you automatically. That is what I call a magic export or a magic function, because you cannot, as the programmer who's just looking at the code, reason about it. You cannot connect the dots. You have to understand something about the framework in order to do that. Those things made building the framework really hard, because
and no extremely nice for the dev because of the magic 99% of the time, except for the time it breaks. It's one of those things. It's such a double-edged sword because it's so nice when it works and so bad when it doesn't.
Well, I mean, the thing is, you as a programmer understand TypeScript or JavaScript. You're entering the conversation with your framework with some prerequisite knowledge, which is the language that you're coding in. And there are contracts in that language, and the framework author has thrown that away. They're like, hey, remember that thing that you like explicitly understand about the language? They don't matter anymore. Just do this weird other thing that we
I wrote
suggest
200 lines of Babel that he will never be able to understand.
Yeah, and no one else on the team can maintain them, and blah, 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 blah. So I wanted to get rid of that. I wanted to make sure that when you were programming, it felt like you were programming in TypeScript. And in order to do that, we had to take out any code generation. So there are no magic types. There are no transpilation side effects. And a lot of people will say, hey, but you're using JSX and TypeScript and stuff like that. Yeah, we are. But what I mean is the framework isn't doing... Yeah, the framework isn't doing anything crazy.
So there's no scaffolding CLI commands at all?
Nothing. We don't even have a CLI as well. Like,
yeah, you just generate the there's two different templates though, right?
Yeah, we have a standard starter, which includes web authentication. It uses Prisma as the ORM, and it includes a durable object session. And then we have the minimal starter, which includes absolutely nothing. Yeah. So the second thing the principle that was really important to us was composability. It's really nice to be able to have these distinct pieces that you can connect together in any way possible. And you see that with Vite. You have your Vite config, you can introduce plugins in there. We wanted to give you that ability to begin with. So like, we're just Vite. Our project is just Vite, and then our router is just a simple set of functions that you can compose in any way to create a certain shape. And by the way, I did look at Remix's router when I built our own one. You'll see a lot of the function method names are the same. I took them from there. I will happily say that I did, because the ideas are good. We just modified them to make sense in the world that we wanted to build. And really, it's just, so it's like the prefix part we took the route part, and that's it. Like, so Ryan, come at me. No, he won't.
Well, a lot of these patterns happen in SvelteKit. They happen in Solid Start. The Nuxt, there's a lot of frameworks that have a whole bunch of kind of somewhat similar and somewhat differing patterns that you can kind of map to each other in lots of different ways. So
yeah,
I think it's good to sometimes use the same naming, because if it's going to work the same way, then people can come in with that knowledge already.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, and especially like things like nested routes and loaders, like they are concepts from before even React Router. Like Ember was probably the first one to introduce these through a router, and then they made their way into other routers. So yeah, it's not always easy to trace them back, but yeah, some people get overly excited about, hey, we invented this. Did you steal this from us?
Yeah,
I
You're
used
doing
to
good.
say Redwood invented all sorts of things that they never got credit for, so I always thought it was kind of ironic.
There's this thing that Tom Preston Warner speaks about called the adjacent possible. There's a certain period of time where everyone sees the same stuff, and some people will speak about them and share them. And it's not necessarily that they're actually stealing each other's ideas; they're actually thinking of them and doing them at the same time. I think the theory of relativity is actually one of those that could be an adjacent possible idea.
Yeah, the term multiple discovery is used a lot when, like, how Leibniz and Newton both created calculus at the same time, or Darwin and another guy both create evolution at the same time. So the adjacent possible is what makes parallel discoveries possible. And also because if you're doing it publicly, then you're being influenced by the people sharing it. So it's more like a research and development project, like the way science has been done for 400 years, which involves everyone building on each other's pieces.
Yeah, there is no other way. And then the other thing that we wanted to do was lean heavily into the web. So everything we do is fetch, and if the browser offers a native implementation of something, we just surface that to you, not through an abstraction, but just directly. And I think that future-proofs a lot of the work that we are doing on the core of the framework. All right, let's do some code.
Nice. Actually, I have a couple quick questions about the principles before we get into the code. The biggest thing that I'm curious about is, how do you reconcile like these design principles with something like React Server components? Like, let's say composability, I can probably understand that server components allow this capability of like build composable logic across the client and server. But use client and use server definitely feel like very far away from magic. And I don't necessarily mean that as like a bad thing. Like, I'm a big fan of use client and use server. I think some magic is sometimes nice. I also do understand the motivation behind like the zero magic principle. It's definitely like a good value to hold, and it leads to some good designs as well. But I'm curious, how do you think about like, you want your framework to be zero magic, but you're also using React Server components, which seem to bring a lot of magic into, and at the same time also, like, it doesn't seem exactly web first, even though like it might seem like that sometimes. So yeah, I'm just curious about the thought there.
Yeah, so
I'm sure you have had this question before as well.
I have. We're trying to be non-contradictory in our statements, but then people see us using something like React Server components, and they're like, hey, but how do these things work together? So I do not really like the way that directives work, or I do not like the way that I don't like the implementation of directives. I wish they were a little less magic, so it wasn't this like string in the top of a file or at the top of a function. But fundamentally, the technology, that was a really weird way of pronouncing that. The technology of how they're implemented are really, really web first. They're really, really straightforward in my mind. And maybe this is because I've implemented them twice, but when I'm using them, I still make really dumb errors. So like, there is a bit of a DX issue here, and I think we're going to fix them over time. One of the things that I want to point out is that I really think that React Server components make the most sense in a server-first architecture. So if you have a client-side router and you're trying to lean into React Server components, it's probably not the right tool for the job. But if you're doing request response, where you have this single entry point, you're setting middleware, you're setting cookies and sessions and headers and things like that, and then you're spitting out something at the end, it's probably going to feel a little more intuitive. And that's what we've noticed with what we've built. It feels a lot more intuitive. And I can actually explain a little bit about how I see React Server components and React Server functions working and how they are actually web first.
Could we go into the code for this part, and you could pull up like one of these files that relates to the React Server components specifically? I think that would help.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to give you...
Show me a server component, sir.
I am going to show you a quick demo. This is a Redwood SDK app. So it starts off with this define app thing, or this define app function, which takes an array of route handlers. Starting off, we have the middleware, and you can introduce another piece of middleware. So you can just say it like, this is another piece of middleware. I get the context from here, and then I can actually modify the context. I'm going to just turn this off. Where is it?
Quick comment while you're doing that. Agree with that. I think that's why the initial reaction from community to RSCs is so negative. We were all doing client-side stuff. And Fuzzy says, this is interesting because I wanted to hear the take of RSC from a framework author's point of view, because it's not really meant for the normies. Yeah, there's like 6 people who have like the experience actually talking about React Server components, maybe like 24 on Earth.
Yeah, but it's getting better. I think we are early, and I think we've got to keep that in mind, that the patterns that React Server components introduce are really powerful, and they do end up making development a lot easier. It's just that we're super early. All right, so this is middleware. What will happen is when the request hits this server, it will first go through this, and then it will hit this one where you can set up a user and this kind of thing. And this context object is available in every route. There's also a global called request info that you can import in your server functions and then use this. And then you get into this part where you define the render. So we say, when this route is matched, render this document. When this route is matched, render this document. So I feel like just let me know if that doesn't make any sense, because I'm explaining maybe multiple.
From here, you should go to the document file.
Okay, perfect. All right, so when we say render,
you didn't have the document file before all of these frameworks.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and I mean, usually what you would have is like index.html file here.
Exactly. Right? Yes. Yeah.
But we were like, hey, what we want to do is give you the ability to control every byte over the wire. How do we do that? Well, I guess it starts with like, where do you embed your pages when you render them out? So we have this React component here. You can set the title, you can include style sheets, and then you can also import the client-side code. So why that's important is this here. So I'm going to open up the network tab.
Well, we can't see the network tab because the font's super duper small. We can see on the screen. We need to bump it up a bunch.
I will. I just want to restart my server here. Okay. So here they have the network tag. What you can see is that it's importing a whole bunch of chunks. React refresh, because this is development mode. So it's importing JavaScript, CSS, and images and things like that. Because I control the document, I can actually turn off client-side hydration. And it's server-side rendered, so I can refresh this. And what you're seeing is it's just pulling in the CSS and the fav icon and HTML. So this is just HTML now. And I can just click and, nothing will happen. There's no interactivity. There's no JavaScript here. Why is that important? That's important because you can keep your marketing site or parts of your site that do not require any JavaScript whatsoever, not even React, completely separate from the parts that do. And these are all server-side rendered. So I don't know if you've ever had to build a website where there was a marketing site, but it try to figure out if you were logged in, and you'd see this thing that says login, and all of a sudden it flashes and it says go to dashboard or whatever. It's because it's loading the whole page. It's loading a ton of JavaScript, and then it's running a separate query to a server that says, hey, is this person logged in? Oh yeah, they are. Flip the button. Now you can say, go to my dashboard. Here you can do it.
So Fuzzy's asking a question: shouldn't the script tag be deferred or async module?
No. So we actually use an optimization here where we preload the module to begin with. So the very first thing we do when we hit this is we start preloading the module. Then after the root comes into place, we execute it if it is imported. So we've gone around this a couple of times, and my description might not be 100% accurate because I didn't actually write this code. But before we implemented this, what we were seeing was that we would have a delay in when the hydration or when the interactivity would be available. So because we were doing it here down at the bottom, interactivity would only happen once everything had done loading. And we want this is streamed down to you as well. So we want to do this as quickly as possible. So your time to interactive is really fast. And if you are shipping a Redwood SDK app, you are almost 100% guaranteed to get 100 score on Lighthouse without trying. You have to try really hard not to. And that's, I think, because we have taken the fundamental pieces of the web and made them first class. Yeah.
Nice.
As he said.
Okay.
Does this do like any of that fancy, what was it called? Like event replay that React has, where if React hasn't hydrated the page, it's going to record like any user events that happen and then replay them like once hydration is complete. Is that a thing?
I don't think so. I've never experienced that or seen any code that could make that happen. So I've just turned client-side hydration back on, right? Let's have a look here quickly at the HTML. So you'll see in this is the part that, let's turn it off again. I want to turn this off. And then we refresh this. So you see down here, we have this script tag that's included in the page. This is React Server components flight data. And what this tells the client-side React to do is like what to do. It tells it what to import, how to get things booted up. And it's all in this like JSON.
Tailwind in there.
Yeah, it's all in there. But the problem is none of this stuff will work if we don't have any client-side code in it. So here I'm going to enable it again. And now we can actually, the client-side code will deal with this and make it interactive. So what you're seeing now is I'm clicking on these little emojis and they're appearing on the screen. Or I can type 1, 2, 3, 4, and they'll appear on the screen. This works through React Server components. Another thing that I wanted to show you is how, like we said, that we give you access to every byte over the wire. That includes the client-side hydration. So if you open up client.tsx, you'll see that it imports client and it initializes it. If I just, I can just put a console.log in here. Or I can enable like TanStack's router. If I wanted to do client-side navigation, I could do it in here. So my initial payload would be server-side rendered, and then I would initialize React, and then I could enable some kind of browser-based, what am I trying to say? Browser-based navigation. Okay, so that's the one thing I want to show you. And now I want to show you how this is implemented, how React Server components work. Okay, so we have the reaction page. It doesn't have use client at the top, so that means it's a server component. So what's happening here is this JSX is getting rendered out into HTML, and there's no other functionality included. But the emoji picker is a client component. And it's a client component because it has interactivity. So that's like effects, state, click handlers, those kind of things are interactive. So how this works is if you push a key down or you click this, one of these emojis, it calls a server function. The server function is just imported from here. And you just execute it like this. So what this server function is just a bunch of functions that have use server prefixed at the top. And what this is doing is it's just storing state on the server. So it's taking a reactions array and it's appending the current reaction to this array. And then there's another.
I want to actually pause you right here for a second and go back to this file. Yeah. So can you talk about the real-time aspect to Redwood? So I feel like this is really important and fairly significantly different because now we're off GraphQL. We don't have to worry about any of that bullshit. We can actually do this now.
So I will show that to you a little bit later.
Okay.
I just want to go through the whole RSC flow, and then I will show you the real-time stuff. But yeah, that's what you ruined the aha moment for me.
I wanted to bring it up because we're seeing it in the code, and because Dev specifically has been working on this. He was doing this for solid, so he's gonna have a bunch to say about it. But yeah, that's fine. Continue with the flow you were going on.
Cool. This is one of the features that we think is experimental because we haven't built enough on top of it, and we want to.
It's one I want to use actually, so that would be a potential thing.
Okay, cool. All right.
Sorry to derail. Continue.
No, it's fine. So add reactions appends that a reaction to the array, and then we have another function called get reactions, which is on the reaction page, and you'll see that this is server rendered. So when we introduce a new one here, it adds it to the array, and then it appears on the page. Do you want to know how that flow works and why I think it is actually web, like it supports web APIs?
Is there a diagram, and can we ChatGPT out a diagram right now?
I think I can show you the code, and then we can draw one at the same time if that helps.
That could be cool.
And we can go through so let's do that. All right. So we have this add reaction thing. It's a server function. So what React Server Components does in the background, and I mean Vite, when it's transpiling, it has this step where it looks for this use server in your code. And then it says, oh, hey, all these functions that are being exported here, we have to expose them as an RPC. So it creates a unique key value pair for this particular function. So it will say, it's actually the file name. So it'd be like src app pages reaction functions.ts, and it'll be hash add reaction, hash get reactions, hash reset actions. So it creates like this key that maps to this particular function. And then on the client side, when I call this function, it's going to create a fetch call to my server that has that key in it. And then that will execute this function on my server. And then that function will return two things. It will first return the return value from this function if it had one, like this one, it returns reactions. And then it will return the entire rendered page. So this whole thing here will be returned as flight data. Sorry, I'm trying to read the comments as well whilst I'm speaking here. So let's have a look at the network debugger. Let's just clear these off. So I'm going to run this. Oh, okay, here we are. Lol. Just to make this full screen. Okay, scroll down to the bottom. So you can see here, what's happening is we're posting to the server, and it's got this __ RSC thing, and then it's got the RSC action ID. And you see there's the file name and the function name. And then you'll see we're also pushing in this emoji. And then what's happening is it's returning flight. So it's saying, hey, this is the new page. React's client-side stuff picks this up and does the render diff on the front side. So like you get this experience where it looks like the stuff is just appearing, but it's actually being rendered by React through the server, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how React Server Functions work.
Nice. For people who might not be familiar, you're using the term flight. Do you want to give a quick explanation of what flight or flight data means?
Yeah, so this is actually what the React team calls it. I actually I've called it the RSC payload, and I think that makes more sense. So what it is it's an array, right? And you'll see it's got all these weird little. It's got its own DSL, and it'd be like, this is an import of this file and this file, so it imports those over the wire, and you'll see that. Or actually, I don't know. I actually don't know what this is. I don't know enough about this format to be able to tell you what it does, but it explains what appears on the page or what has changed on the page. Yeah, that progressive JSON is exactly what you're seeing here.
I'll read out some of these comments that we were kind of just showing on screen.
Yeah.
Bro Nifty was saying he was chatting with Ryan of Node and Dino about basically what we were calling it as self-hosted durable objects. And this is very much the concept. Then Fuzzy said, React takes the Atkins diet and it comes out looking like Billy Piper after okay, this is a lot of references. So Atkins diet is
Billy Piper is
meat, I think. I have no idea what Billy Piper is either.
Half a pound of Coke is an Oz of Coke.
Billy Piper is an actress who played Rose Tyler, the companion to both the 9th and 10th Doctor on Doctor Who.
Oh man,
Europeans.
All right, I'm back. I also posted a quick link in a recent blog post by Dan that talks about this idea of streaming data over JSON, and I think that's if someone is more wants to look more into what flight data or this 3-2-1, this special form of serializing data over streams, that's a pretty good read called Progressive JSON.
Yeah, I love that blog post. It was fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. It gives you a lot of good context. So that's why I say that RSC is actually web first, because it's just using fetch under the hood. And there's a whole bunch of moving parts there, a client part and a server part and a transpilation step that maps these things out. You could actually write those maps by hand, but it would kind of suck. Maybe they should have done that first. They should have been like, all right, if you want to expose a function as a RPC, put it in this thing and map it yourself. That might have been better for people to swallow than doing the step there. And you see this in TanStack. I think they actually use a function to mark whether things are, whether something is a server function or not. So there are alternative implementations, but I wanted to stick to what I felt was what the React team put forth, because I think that what we're building is a really good answer to some of the other more popular React frameworks. If you're looking for something that is sort of not as opinionated, that is just bare bones and clean. Okay. So there's something I want to show you, and it's real time. We support the ability to control every byte over the wire. And one of the things that we introduced, because we are building on top of Cloudflare, is real time. So they have this thing called a durable object that allows you to have probably thousands of WebSocket connections, and it can scale infinitely. Let's just say an infinite number of WebSockets. And we wanted to make that part of the framework, because we have this idea that React could be really good at that as a first principle. If your state lives on the server and all your rendered diffs or all the things are coming from the server, you could just push that up to the server and then make real-time work. So I'm just going to copy this code here. And I'm going to place this into client.tsx. So if you remember correctly, we have this file here, our document, which has this client.tsx thing. I thought state should live in the server signal. I don't know what that means. I'm sorry.
That's a reference to the real-time stuff that I was working on.
Oh, okay.
I was like, Dev will know what it is. It's a signal.
Cool. All right. So what I did was I replaced the initialization of the client over here with the initialization of a real-time client. So what we do is the first request upgrades itself to a WebSocket, and then subsequently we pass all the requests over this WebSocket and all the responses. And we have this key here, which is the page name. So what's happening here is I refresh this. You saw all those emojis appeared because those were actually, that's the state that's stored in the server. So if I reset the server and I start it up again, there will be no more emojis. There's just the one, the initial state, and then I can add a whole bunch more. Now, if I open up another browser window, I'll stick those in there, you'll see that initial state rendering in, and then, oops, I can hit 1 and 2 and 3, and you can just like spam this like crazy. And you get real-time React. Just, I didn't change any of the code. I'm just using server actions. I'm still doing like page renders. But me and this other browser now are on the same key. This part here, we're on the same page. So I can also be explicit here and make this just /. And then this page will be real time. And that's how we're thinking about this. There are some other nuanced things around this. Like this is client server client or client server clients, but you can also do server clients. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can communicate. Let me just make this full screen. So we got client server client, and then we got server client updates. And these docs really go into in depth about how this works. Yeah, we'd love people to try it out and let us know where it doesn't feel right, because this is one of our experimental features. You'll see here, some APIs might change. So yeah, and I don't know if people know this, but we're actually also starting a sort of I don't want to call it an internship, and it's late at night, so I can't think of the actual word, but I wrote it down. We're starting a fellowship for open source developers. And one of the people that we're sponsoring to begin with is Johannes Schickling, and he just built something called LiveStore. LiveStore is like a sync engine for data, and he's going to improve it on Cloudflare. There's a whole bunch of stuff that he wants to do around this, and this might be a better way to do real time. That's more that doesn't send like full payloads over the wire and things like that. But yeah, so this is LiveStore. You should check it out. It's got a beautiful website, and we're sponsoring Johannes for 3 months, and he's going to build some really cool stuff on Cloudflare and help us with Redwood SDK.
Yeah, super excited about LiveStore. I think I'm hoping that in the next week or couple weeks I can get a chance to play around with it, see if there's like the solid bindings are doing expected things, and maybe update them as well.
Nice.
Super excited.
That'd be great. LiveStore. Cool. Maybe Johannes can hire you to update those for the solid. Solid.
Probably, yeah. I would be happy to see like people and companies actually putting money behind Solid. There's a bit of that going on.
You need to find an eccentric billionaire who has a bunch of money to give away. That's the only way it's going to happen. So thanks, Tom.
Yeah, you need one of those. Wait, doesn't Solid have a good sponsorship already?
Not a billionaire. There are no billionaires backing Solid, no.
I mean, yeah, there's a Sentry employs Ryan to work on it. There's like a bunch of open source sponsors on Open Collective, and they go on like that money goes to fellowships very similar to this, where we hire people from the community, or we pay people from the community to build some cool stuff around Solid. And last year there was a hackathon, which I ended up winning. So I took a bunch of that money, I guess.
Oh, you actually won money. You can win money at hackathons? What are you talking about? I didn't know that's a thing. I thought it was just for the like clout or something.
Yeah, it was an open source hackathon. Funnily enough, had money.
How much did you win?
The project, it was 7,000. Not too much, but it was good enough. And it was the...
That's a shitload of money. I live in South Africa. That's like a lot of money. Yeah.
No, for sure. Yeah, for India as well, that was a lot of money. And the project
your
that
parents
won
are like,
was...
what?
Exactly.
Wait, are
yeah.
your parents? Are they still in India?
Yeah, my entire family is in India.
Okay,
I'm just
cool.
here as a visitor. But yeah, the project that ended up winning was like an extension to Solid Start, which added real-time capabilities. So this is something that I'm personally super passionate about
So
how
what
framework, especially... Yeah, go ahead.
what I just showed you, does that
Mhm.
does that raise hairs on the back of your neck, or does it look relatively okay?
So what you shared looks a lot like how I initially like approach real time, uh, but also like how I was approaching it initially was more like kind of framework agnostic, where you can use this approach in whatever framework. What I ended up doing for the hackathon was very specific to Solid. Um, like the basic concept was that along with the use server directive, you have I introduced a use socket directive. Uh, which would like communicate
Awesome.
over WebSockets instead of HTTP. And you can create and pass around signals, which are like reactive state, but you can pass them around from client to server or server to client. And that was the way that you had like reactive updates. Whereas the way that you're doing it is a lot simpler, a lot cleaner, where you just re-render like a route for a server component from the top down on the server, which is going to like go and fetch all the data that it's needed. And then you like use a key to invalidate it when there's a server action. That was my initial approach, which was like a Next.js library called plug, where you use the key to invalidate like a real-time update, and then all the clients would then refetch. Maybe even the server components would get regenerated, but obviously it didn't have like good integrations into Next.js because it was just a library. So what you're doing is like basically a much cleaner version of that, because you could build it into the rendering or the framework itself. So it's definitely a very interesting approach.
And we have Cloudflare backing us up, and that,
Yes.
a lot of people felt that our decision to go all in on Cloudflare was controversial. So like, what about lock-in? And it's like, okay, I can put on my tinfoil hat and I can, think about all the things that could go wrong with Cloudflare. Or I could just try and build some awesome technology and see if it sticks. If people love it, that's good enough for me. And maybe 10 years down the line, Cloudflare's like, you know what? We're going to delete all of this stuff. And everything they've done is open source. So I don't really think that there is that direct of a vendor lock-in. I think what there is like a deep amount of productivity that you gain from using Cloudflare as your provider of choice. And it's free. It's free. Like, where on earth do you get something like that? And it's everywhere. There are 330 nodes all over the world. I have one in South Africa, which is down here at the bottom of nothing. And my internet is like, the sites that I build are fast. So like, that matters to me. Like a kid who's living in a rural community nowhere on earth, like in a place that doesn't really feature, can build software, can ship it, and it can still feel fast for them. I think that's really powerful. They also don't have to pay $20 for a hosting provider, $20 for a database, $20 for an auth provider. Like everything is there that you need to build software. And you can just really focus on the software that you want to write, not having to plug different sets of infrastructure together. So you're not trying to figure out what queue service to use and like, should I use Redis or should I use Postgres? Sorry, I'm ranting here. But
D1, no, I think D1 is what really pulls it all together. So it used to be when we were first trying to get into cloud, when I was first looking at Cloudflare, it was in 2021. I found the original forum post when I first was like, hey, we should try and do Cloudflare or the Redwood. And it was April of 2021. It was completely impossible in every single way you could possibly imagine. And one of the biggest things is that there's no way to do the database. You couldn't even run Prisma, let alone a database. So once they got D1, that was a huge piece to actually make this feasible.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've been improving their offering year on year, and it's faster than I can imagine. They have really solid engineering engineers and a solid engineering culture. I'm sitting from the outside and I'm looking at what they're doing, and it seems like a startup. They're running their teams like startups. They ship fast and they put awesome things out there. Someone has asked, did I not consider Dino? And I did.
We could list 10 things Cloudflare has that Dino deploy does not have. So it's not even close. And
but the thing is, they also,
the region thing alone, they would have an African region, I'm sure.
And another thing to consider is that they actually are building their own framework. I think there's someone on their team that is building. There we go. So, I mean, Dino is building their own framework. There's no way that I can enter that conversation and have a better seat at the table than someone who works for them. So when I looked at that, I was like, okay, this to me, I don't know. I don't want to compete with this. There is already a framework that is doing this.
It'd be like building the framework on Vercel. It'd be like, I'm going to make a framework around Vercel. It's like, are you now?
Yeah, that's a good, yeah. It's like, I found this hosting provider. They're called Vercel. I'm going to build the best framework for them.
So Cloudflare doesn't have 30 frameworks. 30 frameworks work for Cloudflare because every framework eventually made it work for Cloudflare. Cloudflare frameworks used to be things like stuff Luke was writing, which is like Worktop that had like 200 GitHub stars. That was like a Cloudflare library from back in the day. Hono is kind of like a Cloudflare library, but again, it's not just for Cloudflare. There's a suite of things that are meant to just use the standard JS implementation. And so that kind of goes along with like the Bun and Dino stuff as well. And there's certain deployment platforms that are now leaning more into that. But there's not a lot of really well-known frameworks that were just started around Cloudflare and built around Cloudflare specifically, except a couple from people who worked in the companies, and they did not become very popular. They were very interesting, though.
I just want to share my screen again, and I want to show you some of the other stuff about the framework. Sorry, is it okay for us to segue at this point?
This is totally great, man. We can go any direction you want. Feel free to drive the conversation, and we'll ask questions when we can.
Okay, so one of the things that I love about React, and so I mean, they didn't invent this, but they really popularized it, was the thought that you had to co-locate stuff. If stuff changed together frequently, put them together in the same folder. I wanted to bring that to the way that you define routes. So if you have a look here, you're defining a route, and then we're actually returning a JSX page. You can also define a route, API, and then you can return a response. So you're co-locating API routes and JSX routes in the same space. Let's just pull up the browser here. Over here, /API. Hey, so you can co-locate these two things together. And if you wanted to group them by prefix, you said, hey, actually, what I really want is these things to be under real time. You just grab that, put that in an array, like that. And then I need to access this via real time. And then I get that same thing. We have middleware. So this runs before every request. Every request, this is global, but sometimes you really want to scope things down to a particular request. And it's really annoying to have to do something like this. To have to grab the request. Oh, geez. Thank you. And then, do something on the URL if, it does, do this other thing. But this is how you have to do it. If you wanted to do like authentication just on a particular URL, or didn't want to have, sessions or things like that. So you could actually move this down here. You can move this into the document or the prefix. But that's still for all these things. Let's move it into there. Now actually you can't do this on the prefix. You can do it on the document. Sorry. I'm making assumptions here. But what I want to show you is something called an interrupter. So an interrupter is a locally scoped per route piece of middleware. So how that works is you create a route and then you wrap it in an array, and then you can just declare another function. And this function can interrupt the request flow. So what you could do is you can say return new response. Oh, geez. And then I can give it a status code. We could do like 404 or something like that. So this one will run first. This one will not run. So we won't get hey, we'll just get this page can't be found. Or we could do something like if request.method is not equal to post. And then we can say like, I don't know, 503. Is that how you do that? I forget. All right, it's unable to handle that request. So what you can also do is then pull this out and then create a function. So you can say const is post equals to, and then you can stick that in here. And you can start pasting this throughout your code base. So you can introduce these, you can create these like distinct little functions that can validate request methods or whether a user is authenticated or whether they have admin rights, et cetera, and you can introduce them here. So you can say if there's a post and if they're an admin or it is authenticated, and these will run sequentially. And if they fail, it will interrupt. And then you're just returning a response. So like for if someone is not authenticated, return a non-authenticated header and then also redirect them at the same time to the login page. And that's the surface area of the router, the router's implementation. It's this prefix function, it's the route function, it's the render, and then there's another one called layout, which allows you to handle nested layouts. And that's really all we have. And we give you the ability to return JSX, which is then rendered into HTML, streamed down to the browser, along with the flight or the RSC payload. And then it hydrates on the client side. What's really cool is because we're just doing request response, you can actually serve Hono from Redwood. Like you can, if you prefer to write your API routes in Hono, just do that. Yeah.
You can do that with Asho too. You can like just stick Fastify in it if you want.
Yeah, basically anything that works with like standard request response, right? I guess this is like one of the nice things about the movement towards everything using web standards is that you can bring in 5 routers into your app if you want. It's not a great idea, but you can.
Yeah, if you're trying to like port something over from some other legacy system, you're like, actually, we want these things. We want to actually put a React front end on our API. Just bring it in, or just send the request already directly to the API and just return the response, like proxy it essentially. This is one thing I wanted to show you when you said that like the standardization of request response is so nice. It's more than that. It's like, I like to call it this, like it's Unix pipe for the web browser, because you can literally take a request and you can pass it from service to service. And I see that in uploading files.
You bumped your font up.
Oh yeah, sorry. So this is how you handle file uploads in, oh no. I wanted to get the client side stuff. Wait, I'm quickly gonna go grab another code base here.
Yeah, I was kind of curious to talk a little bit about the database and storage aspect of it, but you can kind of show your thing first, and then I'll ask some questions about it.
Okay. All right. So this is an app called Buildable. It allows you to create invoices, and you can upload a logo for one of your invoices. So I'm just going to find the page that does that. I think it's over here. Nope, that's not it. It's over here. Can we take like a 2-minute break?
You can take a break, and me and Deb can chat and fill time while you do something if you need to.
I need to do something. I will be back in a second.
Do it, man.
No worries. We can keep filling up time with random chatter.
Oh, it's actually I can present my screen. I wanted to show real quick. Amy, because she's amazing, has awesome Redwood SDK already. So I used to manage the last one, the this awesome Redwood. It's got me on there. I probably did like 90% of the maintenance of this thing, so it's got a ton of stuff. Every single thing on here is at least like 3 years old. So no one should use this. This is a cautionary tale. Stay away from this repo. This is what you want.
Nice.
And so it's got a drizzle example. That's okay. That's interesting. I was going to ask, how important really is Prisma to the framework at this point? Doesn't seem like it's that important anymore. So it used to be the thing that you would start with to generate your GraphQL schema, and also your scaffolding, and all that stuff's gone now.
Yeah, I mean, I see a usage with Prisma. I mean, it's in the starter project, but I believe the other starter project
standard is what I'm saying. It comes with Prisma, but I'm just asking, like, how can I rip it out and use something else?
Yeah, because there is a minimal starter that doesn't have Prisma, so you can use, like, you can bring whatever in.
Yeah, we have one.
Yeah, this one.
We have Drizzle, and we have a Drizzle example, and we also have a better auth implementation.
I need to look at that actually, because the main docs only have the passkey example.
Yeah.
This must be it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's like a community. Yeah, there's community templates for every framework that use Better Auth. It's one of the nicer things that have happened since Better Auth got released. I'm happy I don't work at Clerk right now. I'm sure there's
no Clerk example right now with this new one.
I mean, technology is fashionable, and I can almost guarantee you that this shape of Better Auth is not the last one that we'll see.
I just got Clerk working with Astro too. I was like, oh my god, now I have to switch to Better Auth after trying Better Auth and Astro, and then go into Clerk. Now we go back to Better Auth.
Yeah.
Or I could just build the first Clerk example. Probably isn't.
And I mean, none of this actually like matters to your friend. I mean, your users, right? So, yeah. Okay, I want to show you how file uploads work and why Fetch is such an amazing piece of tech to build on top of. So, this is a standard input for a file. It accepts images, and when you change the file, it grabs the file from the target. It constructs a form, and it appends the file to this form thing, and then it pushes it up with Fetch. So it says, hey, the body is the form data, it's a post, and it sends it up to this route here. That route.
Oh, is that a utility for like type safe URLs throughout the
app?
It
is, but we are going to introduce one that is automatic, but because this one, what you're literally doing is passing in, like I pass in this thing, and then it allows me to I pass in the string, and then it allows me to generate the type safe URL.
Yeah, this is almost how TanStack Router works, except that it's like you give it the URL pattern and then the parameters separately, and at runtime it'll come up with the string.
So I mean, what I want is, if I define a route in my worker, I want that to be typed, because what if I decide to change my route and then I ship something that is referencing like a broken string? That doesn't feel, that's like the number one reason why I want this. But ours doesn't do that right now because I'm explicitly providing those things. I need to figure out how to do this without a generation step. Maybe it just isn't possible, in which case I just won't do it. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, this is like a simple way to send up a piece of form data to a server. And then on the server side, how you actually deal with this is you have this route. You pull out the form data, you pull out the file from the form, and then you stream that directly into R2. So R2 is Cloudflare's bucket storage or file storage. So you'll see here, I just say environment R2 put. I gave it a name, and then I just stream it inside. That's it. So I pass it directly from the browser, comes through my route into R2. How easy is that?
This looks clean.
And then, if you want to actually send that file down to the client as well, it's the same thing. So it's like download, you get the object from R2, and then you just stream it down. So you say new response object.body, and that's it. So there's no like crazy, there's no like crazy libraries or abstractions on top of this. We're just using fetch, request and response, using the technologies that the browser gives you. And it makes things really simple.
So Dev is making a joke about the name R2. The name is the same way that HAL gets its name in 2001. So you know what HAL shifted one letter in the alphabet each is? Think about it.
No.
You guys are smart. You'll figure it out.
Okay. I need to write
You're
this down.
making me pull up the English alphabet.
It's too late.
Once you realize this, you blow your mind.
Oh, it's IBM.
I never knew that until like a month or two ago, and someone on a podcast mentioned it, and I'm like, that's incredible. So R2 is S3 shifted over one.
Shifted back one.
Shifted back one, yeah. When I say over, I mean in either direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh. Smart.
Because it's meant to specifically be a replacement to S3. They made an S3 compatible API. They created a tool to specifically migrate your data from S3 to R2. It was a huge thing.
Yeah, and that thing has got a really great name. It's something like, it's got the word sucker in it. It's called like the ingester sucker or something like that.
Wow. We found at least one
Super
company that's good
slurper.
at naming things.
Slurper, the super slurper. Yeah, it didn't have... I mean, sucking and slurping is basically the same thing. The super slurper. Yeah, it's a really great name. And you can tell that it's like a company that has fun.
Yeah. I mean, Cloudflare, out of every company in the world, you would expect them to be good at cache invalidation. So they're probably also good at naming things.
That is good. That's
okay.
on the internet.
That was thank you very much for the tour of Redwood. It's a lot of things seem very exciting. I just have like so many questions, but I wanna first make sure that you have talked about the things you want to talk about, and if Anthony has things that we might want to address first. Because I can keep going about talking about frameworks.
I have spoken about everything I want to talk about, and it was nice.
We should do some Q&A then from Dev.
See you guys later. I'm just kidding.
And then I'll show my auto show implementation, but we should keep going. Dev, you should ask whatever you want. We can take as much time as you need. Just
so you know, it is really late for me. So my bedtime is around about now. Okay. I'm a parent to a 3-year-old. But I'm going to stay here with you.
We do 15 more minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah. That's I'm not going to go sleep after this anyway. I'm probably going to sit there and be like thinking it through.
Of course. Okay. Okay. I guess the first thing is that what happened with, and I'm sure like both of you can talk to this question, but what happened with GraphQL? Like, what was the original idea behind building a framework around GraphQL, and then like maybe what are some learnings that pushed you away from it when, especially when coming to like, or like rebuilding or rethinking what a framework should look like?
Yeah. So I mean, we had used GraphQL. Like a lot of the things that we put into Redwood.js were things that we learned at a company that Tom was building with one of the other GitHub co-founders called Chatterbug. It was a language learning startup, and they had a mobile phone and a web interface. They had a mobile app and a web interface. So that kind of multi-client world where the developer could kind of like define how they wanted the data made a lot of sense on paper. In practice, though, I don't think it really worked out. I don't think that a tool like GraphQL works really well for a startup. there's way too much boilerplate to make it work properly. And the majority of the time, the same person building the front-end app or the mobile app is the same one building the APIs. So it didn't really make sense that you're offloading this to separate teams. Yeah, it was a really trendy piece of technology back then. And I think there were even like GraphQL conferences. And I think that's a really, really good lesson. It's like, just because something is trendy now.
I spoke at like 5 GraphQL meetups, dude. I worked at a GraphQL company for an entire year, dude.
And GraphQL, do they still exist?
You remember StepZen?
Are they still here?
StepZen, they were acquired by IBM. So they're now one of 100, because Anant worked at IBM before he created the company. So he worked like the Watson team way back in the day, early AI.
That's cool.
But yeah, I mean, it was a good move for them because that made the most sense. And so they're just like now one of 100 services probably on whatever IBM's cloud that no one uses is.
And the thing is, for a lot of corporates, when you tell them, you give them those like lists of things that the developer there's this separation of concerns and the developer can do all these things and this multi-device and blah, blah, blah. That makes a lot of sense to like a person working in a big corporation, and they're like, yeah, this covers all the bases. I'm not going to get fired for making this decision. So maybe that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, you can also speak then, I guess, quite a lot to what happened with GraphQL.
Yeah, I actually also went through like a whole round of interviews just a couple of weeks ago with Apollo, and I thought I was going to get the job, but then they had layoffs and did a hiring freeze on the role. So I think I just it was a bad point in time, I think. But there was a moment where I was like, oh, I'm about to do GraphQL again. But I loved GraphQL. I feel like a lot of people's problems with GraphQL were like partly self-inflicted because they weren't willing to just accept that you're going to have to do it a certain way, and that they kind of would bristle against that and be like, no, but I like ways I did things before. And you kind of had to like fully buy into it. And Redwood made that really nice. And the problem is that everyone who complained about GraphQL was complaining about not having a thing like Redwood, not realizing that if they just used Redwood, it would literally solve like 90% of the things they were complaining about with GraphQL, which is like too many weird libraries that are changing and breaking, and you don't know how to do auth, and you don't know how to just secure the endpoint itself. You don't know how to do all sorts of stuff. And so Redwood made all those decisions. And then Redwood itself kind of got into a mode where the React core library was moving in a different direction, and it couldn't continue on with the progress of the underlying React framework while still doing the GraphQL thing. And so there had to be a split at some point where you had to rewrite the whole framework. And there's a podcast on FSJam, a really early episode in like late 2020 or early 2021, where me and Chris are talking about things like Snowpack and Vite and React Server Components, because React Server Components were announced on December of 2020. I remember the day after it was announced, we happened to do a podcast episode. We talked about it. And as we were talking about, we were saying like, we're using Webpack and Babel and we have all this stuff already. And I was like, you would probably have to rewrite the entire framework from the bottom up to use these new tools, because it's going to be like, that's exactly what I said. That's exactly what you ended up doing like 4 years after the fact.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't come to the decision to to build a new framework from scratch lightly. But I looked at what we had. I looked at our growth, and it had stalled. And I don't think that what we had built was really going to translate into more users in today's landscape. I think RSC is something that we tried to implement in the framework for a bunch of years. It just didn't pan out, and we would have been left with a shape that just didn't make a lot of sense. Client-side rendering, this website on a different server, and I really wanted to build on a platform because I don't really think that. I'm getting off on a tangent here. I'll come back to this a little later. I really wanted to give people the ability to exit out of the framework in case the framework didn't exist anymore. I wanted to make sure that it was composable, that you could plug literally anything you wanted inside of it. And that meant that I had to expose those parts to you and do it in an idiomatic and pragmatic way. I didn't want those black boxes that we had in Redwood JS. And actually, the inspiration for what we've done now is actually translating into Redwood GraphQL. Like, we're gonna unpack it so that those people can continue, that have invested into that framework, can continue using it long term, but they can own every single little piece. Someone asked, "Are we going to fork Preact?" No, no. I really want to stick. I really want to stick to React and web standards.
You should assume that anything Parasocial Fix says is not actually true or something you need to respond to seriously. Ever.
Okay. I mean, I do think it's super ambitious. I think, someone was saying that one of the lead developers at React or on Preact actually works for Shopify. So maybe it makes sense.
Yes.
They said
they hired the Preact team and the Remix team. That's why Preact and Remix are now the same framework, because they hired all those people like 2 years ago. And people now are just realizing it because they don't pay attention to these things.
Yeah, and Preact is heavily used within Shopify for a bunch of things here and there.
Yeah. I mean, I think what they're doing is super interesting. If you look at their principles, they're so similar to ours. And just given that, I think that there's probably going to be a level of success. I do think that they're going to change the name. I don't think Remix V3 is going to work for them long term, simply because of the AI and the legacy memories that it has. Fucking Billie Piper. Who's that, man? I'm just kidding. I know it is. She's the person from the Doctor Who.
If Chris was here, he would get it.
Yeah. So one of the things. Now I forgot the thing that I wanted to speak about when I said I wasn't going to talk about that right now. Oh well. Oh, okay. So we all know that programming is actually becoming less emotionally difficult, or let's just say less difficult. And when I say emotionally, it's because there are things that I don't like to do as a developer. I don't like to build forms. I don't like to build authentication, but my day-to-day job requires me to do those things. Now that I can just ask AI to generate it, the emotional lift on me as a developer is lightened. I can just offset all the stuff I don't like to an LLM. So I like to say that coding isn't difficult anymore. It's not the hard part of writing software. It's the architecture. Oh man, that guy's gonna go. Damn it. It's the architecture.
Fuzzy.
And it's when you ship to production. So connecting services together, we could probably get AIs to figure that out later with MCP servers and things like that. But it's still tough. It still takes me out of flow, and it's the thing that I hate the most. And whenever I ship, it's broken. I'm like, I forgot to set that one secret, or the migration didn't run, or whatever. When you ship with Cloudflare, it's a single command, npm release or npx release, and it's live. If you want a staging environment, you just prefix Cloudflare_env equals staging, and it will create a new domain for you, new database, everything new. And then you got it on a staging environment. It feels like you're shipping things like you used to do with PHP. You're literally dragging and dropping a file onto the server, and the moment that's done, it's live. There's a lot of power in that. All of a sudden, you can quick fix things. You can build something in an hour and have it live and show someone. It doesn't feel like you're gluing together thousands of different services, creating API keys, giving them your credit card. And I like to talk about SaaS services as paying 5 taxes. Whenever you use an external SaaS service to the platform that you're building upon, you pay 5 taxes. The first is you have to figure out which one to use. Say, for instance, you wanted a database. You go around, you look at all of them, you read their marketing pages, you look at their pricing plans. There's a lot of work there. Or you just ask someone for a recommendation because they did the work before you. Number 2, you create an account. You give them your credit card details, and then you grab an API key. Number 3, you figure out how the library works locally. You figure out how the library works locally. Yeah, let's just go with that. Number 4, you have to figure out how to make it work in production. And number 5, if you're lucky, you'll get a staging environment. So before you can even get to the point where you're feeling productive with an external service, you're paying a lot of like that emotional baggage of being a developer. You're using like all of that just to get online, and then it's there, and then you're stuck in the service for many years, and you can't get your data out of them or whatnot. So you should own the stack, and Cloudflare allows you to do that.
Cool. No, yeah, I think that's the 5 taxes should definitely be a blog post, and I want to reference this like many times throughout my professional career.
I mean, you felt that, right? Like it's so real.
What's funny is I think that's the most fun part, and that's why I did it like for 10 different frameworks and services. Just wrote a blog post for each of them, and then as soon as I got it working, I'm like, all right, cool. What's the next thing?
Yeah,
it only gets to the point of having just like a deployed page with like some text on it. So it was never actually the point where I was like building like a substantial app with anything happening in it. But I figured out a billion different ways to deploy stuff.
Let's do this now. What I'm gonna do is share my screen. Oops. And I'm gonna show you how.
Are we gonna implement Clerk in Redwood and look at the 5 taxes?
No, I'm gonna show you how easy it is to release something. Is my font big enough? There we go.
Yeah, all right. A couple more. npm run release.
So I'm gonna create a new app from scratch. Create Redwood SDK. Test app. All right, so we're just downloading this now. Test app, pnpmi. Installing the packages. I think we have about 200 megs of packages. The biggest one is Miniflare, which is Cloudflare's local emulation environment that gives you like a database, queues, storage locally. It's really great. So when you install the packages and you have everything you need. I'm just going to see if this is working.
Also, a quick shout out to Veet6 and the environment API that makes something like this possible.
Totally. Veet's amazing. Okay. Hello world. We got that there. All right. Now I'm going to release this. pnpm release. Yes, I wish to proceed with deployment. This is an app that has a database. It has a secondariable object. Oh, geez. When was that? Authentication error. Okay. I'm not logged in because I've been testing some stuff with containers and I messed this up. So let's see. Maybe I can fix this.
I
am logged in, but anyway. Let's just take this here.
And the one I've got mine deployed also.
Like one shot deployed, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when I did that the first couple of times, I would be surprised. This sort of demo was possible for 10 years ago, but like every time you deploy, you're getting a site that's working.
You could do that 10 years ago. You just have to write 10,000 lines of CloudFormation. Sucker would work the exact same way every single time until the end of time. It would outlive all of us and our children.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna release. Boom. Oh, what the fuck? I don't know what I did with this thing. Like I've totally screwed this up.
No worries.
All right.
Live
so my account
has something to do with permissions, it looks like.
Yeah. There's like an error here with my role because I'm one of the beta users in containers, and that required a different role. And I think I've completely broken my user now. So
no worries.
I need
cloud permissions are tough. I guess the final thing that the question that I have in mind is that basically the move from like this client first routing rendering to server first. So server components make the most sense when you have a server first architecture. I think that's like pretty much a superpower of it, and pretty much since like the React server components came out, I have been thinking about, or like at least theorizing of this sort of a framework that would like be a server first framework, embrace server components, offer all these like backend capabilities like auth, database, permissions, queues, everything just out of the box. And I think like Redwood is definitely on like
appears to
the
be
best.
something quite like that.
Exactly, yes. So I think it's like a great kind of shape, or a great like an overall, I guess, concept of a framework, and I'm really happy that it exists. I wanted something like this for a while, but like the more I try to build things with like things like Next.js, React Router, or like really any of these modern frameworks, and like I was at the local first conf last week, where a lot of people are building things that they would call personal software, right? Things like note-taking apps, music apps, or and almost none of them seem to be using any server first technologies. It seems like people who are building this sort of like interactive, dynamic, personal, local first apps, almost all of them seem to be picking like client first technologies that use like a sync engine to talk to a server, and like there's no server rendering, there's no server components. It's client routed, client state, everything. And I know like you're sponsoring Live Store, but like which is like kind of a sync engine and client side database. But I feel like that I don't know how that would work with a server first framework that has server routing, and like the default, the root is it's a request on the server, not on the client. So just curious about like your thoughts there on like server first versus client first.
Yeah. So I think, one of the things that you got to think about is with the examples that you gave, like note-taking apps, music apps, that is personal software, but it's not the way that I see it. That's personal software for your own machine, for your own consumption. It's not something that you're using with a community or a company or friends. So you are scratching your literal own itch, but you're not really helping other people. Maybe you are. Maybe your personal app does do that. But I think, David, are you still here? Yeah, you are.
I'm back.
So
yeah, just small issues.
Okay. So I think that's the difference, is that there are apps that you can build that can help your community, your friends, your family, or your small business. And those things require a server. And even a local first app requires a server. There has to be a place where the data lives so that you can continually get it or share it amongst devices and things like that. And server first is simpler. It's just a much more reasonable way to think about building for the web, because that's how the web fundamentally exists. Like, it exists in this request response model, and everything has been architected towards that. And even the browser is built with those capabilities in mind. The fact that we have client-side routing is, in my opinion, a response to something that existed 10 years ago. And you said it yourself, there is no server-first framework within the React community yet, except for Redwood SDK, and maybe there will be more. But the fact that we have client-side routing was a response to, in my opinion, mobile apps. And the experience that you could get on a mobile app, it was snappy, could have transitions between screens. It kind of gave you that polish that mobile apps had at that stage. But I don't think that that's how we should be building apps in the future. I think we should be optimizing for memory usage, for network usage, and leaning into the technologies that we have fundamentally built these things on top of, optimizing for developer happiness and speed and all that other stuff. And I'm not saying that you can make any choice of technology fast, but is it fast by default? That's like, what is the bare minimum experience? I'm building this from a perspective of, sorry, I'm ranting here for a while. I'm building this from a perspective of someone that grew up and lives in Africa. We have South Africa. We have the biggest disparity in income in the world, and there are people here that spend 25% of their money on bandwidth. shipping a bunch of JavaScript down to those users isn't really the way to do it. And I mean, certainly you could give them an app and that would work as well. But what if they wanted to write software for themselves? Like, what does that look like? Their devices aren't, brand new iPhones or really fast laptops. So you don't want to eat up the battery or consume all the memory. This parasocial is pretty good. So, those are the considerations that we have in mind. It's like we want to build a framework for the majority world. And we want to make sure if it's good for us, like if it's good for people in our communities, then it's just by default going to be good for other people as well. Like if it's fast here, it will definitely be fast in a place that has better network and better computers. That's the perspective that we are coming at this from. So.
Okay, interesting. How does that fare with like the sponsorship of Live Store, which seems like very much the opposite, where you want a database on the client side, not just any database, but SQLite running in memory. It seems like quite the opposite of that idea.
So what we are going to make, Live Store at the moment can work in durable objects. Durable objects are it's a stateful serverless compute. So you like me and you can connect to a durable object, but each of us will get our own database in that durable object. We want to make Live Store work there, so your data lives in the cloud, but then it can also sync down to your local machine and other devices that you own. And that like kind of lives in this world of personal software because you still get to own your data. It's like a discrete database for every single user. And maybe you're sharing data between durable objects or, across far apart regions. I don't exactly know 100% what that looks like, but I think there is a space for that. There's a space for a sync engine. It enables a different class of application to be built.
For sure, yeah. Cool. I'm happy to hear that.
Cool.
Very excited.
Yeah, me too. I feel like the future is now. This framework is so exciting to me. I mean, I'm building it, but from what I've seen, how I've seen people respond and how I've seen people just enjoy writing software with it, it feels like we built something incredible. And my first take was, why aren't all frameworks like this? Why did we take so long to get to this shape? And I don't know why. I don't have a good answer for that. And I know it's my own thing, but it feels like, I don't know, neither of you have children, but when you have a child, they just kind of like exist. Like they come out of you and you're like, whoa, there's a human being. And they came out with a personality. And I didn't do that. Like I did that, but I didn't do that. And that's what it feels like with this framework. It just existed. It came out of something. And I think it came out of our principles. Myself and Justin, most of us are in South Africa. We had these principles and we had this ideal person that we wanted to build the software for. And I think because of that, it just popped out in this shape. And that shape is pretty good, I think. If your kid is good or bad, I'm just kidding. No, they're all good.
Awesome. Did you have any more questions, Dev?
No, I think I'm good for now.
All right. So I need to show
I want to see what you're building. Yes.
I mean, you already know it. It's Auto Show. I just built Auto Show in Redwood. So
I want to see what you're building. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So first, I'll just do the app, and then we can go into the code. So I think this is the one I want. Okay. So basically, the API keys won't be here because this will eventually be a app that people sign up for. They buy credits. They use credits to generate show notes. But you can give a URL. So the URL I'm giving is from this. This is the thing I did where I did 2 interviews that I both talked about a topic like my experience at Lambda School, and I kind of pulled some clips and stitched them together. And there's like an 8-minute kind of thing because I always wanted to have something to like give people if they're like, hey, should I do a boot camp? Because I got asked that question a lot, and it would take me at least 8 minutes to explain and give that answer. So I'm like, here, just listen to this. But so what it's going to do is it's going to transcribe it, and then it's going to take a prompt with the transcripts and feed it to ChatGPT, and it's going to ask it to write a summary and chapters. Okay. Oh, I know what I did wrong. I was going to change this model at the last second, but I typoed it. Yeah.
Aren't those models typed? Those strings are typed, right?
Yeah, they should be.
So you built this in Redwood SDK.
Yep.
And what did that feel like?
Pretty good, honestly. Because when I was saying kind of towards the beginning,
like butter.
Well, sorry. Because of the Cloudflare experience I had, yes, it did feel like butter, and I already had some experience with R2. I wrote like 90% of a blog post about it. Okay, I'm not sure why I'm being dumb. Let me just put it back to the original model. This one I know for sure works.
Why does your login pop up every time? That's weird.
Yeah, it's a 1Password thing. I had to actually turn this off, and I had to turn it back on because I need to log into a thing. Streaming is such a process. But okay, here we go. So this is, I'm going to just go to the page where it's actually rendered. So you have a 1-sentence description, a personal account of learning modern JavaScript, React, Redwood.js, and insights into boot camps like Lambda, including their impact and challenges. And then you have like a 1-paragraph kind of summary of the whole thing, and then it breaks it down into discrete chapters. So
that's really cool.
About learning React.
How long is that? How long is that piece of audio?
It's 8 minutes.
That was pretty quick.
Yeah, so I went through such a process to build this. I originally started with Whisper CPP running locally, and then calling out to ChatGPT's API. And that was great because the transcription was free, and ChatGPT is super cheap. Or I would just copy paste it and put it in the ChatGPT prompt to just get the response back. But then DeepGram and Assembly AI are two really good transcription APIs. So that's what's doing the transcription, and then it just feeds it to the ChatGPT. So there's kind of like two main things. There's the transcription guy, so it's hitting DeepGram, and then kind of parses the output and just gives you the whole transcript. Well, actually, one thing I didn't show here, you can see the transcript at the bottom. Some people may want this, they may not. It's you need it to generate the output, but it also then you have the transcript if you want it. You could do like speaker labels as well also. And then the summarization part, Deb, you and I talked about structured outputs on one of our streams, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm using it finally. So nice. This is the prompt here. Now, this is the simplest version of the app right now. So in the full version that I have built, which I'm probably going to migrate over, there's like 20 different prompts, and you can configure it. And on the front page, it'll show you all the different prompts. You can click different ones to generate all sorts of different outputs. But I just wanted to kind of show the very bare bones. So this gives you 2 prompts: the summary prompt, and then the create chapters prompt. And they all work pretty much the same way. You have a description of it, and then here you have kind of an example where it tells it what it should look like. And then it goes to the ChatGPT API. This is the whole structure output thing. And then it does a validation step, and then it's all returned on the home page.
So this is a client component that calls a server function.
Yes.
Is that correct? And the server function, does it, what happens after that? Does it like redirect you somewhere, or does it just dynamically change the content once it has?
So once it gets the response, it outputs it on the bottom and then saves it to the D1 database, which then gets it on your sidebar here. And then the routes are dynamically generated with the ID for each database entry.
So cool. Can I look at your worker.tsx file?
Yes. And this is the
route. I see you split up the routes. That's cool. So this is also one of the things, like you can co-locate everything, even the routes, and that feels really nice because you just stick them all in a folder.
Yeah, and then this is how you get the summary with each job ID. Apparently there's a summaries endpoint. I'm not doing anything with that one yet. Let's see what happens. Yeah, okay, so that is probably actually, oh wait, API summaries. Okay, cool, so that just gives you the raw JSON data. And then I'll also be using R2 because the way I have it set up right now, I have an S3 bucket where the audio file then gets saved if you want to reference it later.
Very cool.
Yeah. And so you want to see the workers.tsx.
Oh, sweet. Oh, you're actually spreading. That's a nice thing. Like instead of using prefix, you just spread out the array, which is fine. Like you can totally do that. That's, if we're just using ordinary primitives, an array, like you can do whatever you want. Like the language works with you, not against you.
So the way I built this is I took my original implementation, which was for a CLI. This all started as a commander CLI. And then I basically took out everything except for the DeepGram API part and the OpenAI API part. And then I migrated it to using a Cloudflare worker and a React front end. So no Redwood at all, but I basically had it use the Cloudflare worker with a D1 database and the React front end. And then I took the starter project from the Redwood SDK, and I gave it to ChatGPT along with the other project, the Cloudflare React one. I said basically port this to Redwood, and then I gave it a couple Redwood docs as well. And since it maps close enough, since you're close to the metal, that basically worked, and it didn't really get tripped up on anything.
Super cool. Actually, one of the things that I haven't spoken about is our concept of monetization for Redwood SDK. Like,
you don't need to monetize it. You have a billionaire funding it for the rest of your lives, right? That's the deal, right? Tom pays for it forever, and everyone else gets to be paid.
Unfortunately, that isn't the deal. The deal is Tom has given me some money, and that money will run out. And at that point, I will be unemployed. So we don't spend his money. That's why I'm sitting in my garage right now. This looks fancy. This is my garage, okay? And I'm wearing this hat because it's cold. No, it is actually cold. But
so for the sponsor project, are you managing the money that is going to that, or is that separate money that he's also paying for that?
No, that's me. That's Redwood. There's a separate entity called RedwoodJS Inc. that I'm a shareholder of, and I've sold percentages of it to Preston Warner Ventures and Tom Preston Warner. But in order to monetize what we're building, we're thinking of building something called shareware.dev. Actually, we are building shareware.dev. The idea around that is you, Anthony, have now written a piece of software. It's a tool that transcribes audio and has some other distinct abilities that solves a problem for you in particular. But you didn't build a brand around it. Like, you've just built the functionality. You didn't create a pricing strategy. You didn't create a support strategy. None of that stuff. You can take that source code. You can put it on shareware.dev. Because it is so composable, because because our framework is so composable, you can sell just that piece of functionality on shareware.dev for whatever amount of money. And you're literally selling the source code. It's an in-between answer between giving it away for free and having to support people, or selling them the source code, having the license be restrictive enough that they cannot use it commercially or redistribute it, and selling them a yearly license. And we want to open that ability up to everyone. And I know that is a super ambitious idea.
I just found this blog post. So back in April, David wrote a whole post saying he's no longer, because he was kind of leading the charge for the longest time, but it sounds like he's saying to learn more, you'll want to read from Peter. He says that the project is no longer in my or Tom or Rob's hands. I trust Redwood will thrive under my friend Peter's leadership. This is incredible because the framework for the longest time was it started with you and Tom, and then you brought on Rob, and David, and then the 4 of you were doing it for years and years and years and years and years. So this is like a huge thing.
Yeah, and how this came about was Tom jumped on a call with me one day. I shut down my startup. My startup failed. I shut it down and gave the money back to the investors. Snaplet failed. Yeah. I actually got my Snaplet cup here. That's all I have left of my startup. That and a wrecked emotional state.
And a sweet FS Jam episode.
So I shut it down. I went back and I worked for Tom. And after a little bit of time, Tom actually said to me, he's like, "Hey, Peter, do you want to take over leadership of Redwood.js?" And my initial gut reaction was no. No, I'm not doing that. Sorry. I just came out of a startup. I felt like I wanted to die in that whole experience, and I don't want to do that again. And he was like, "Okay, cool. I respect that." And then I thought about it that weekend, and I thought to myself, you know what? This is Tom Preston Warner. He's one of the most prolific developers on earth. Not only that, he's a really, really great guy. And he's asked me, Peter Pistorius, to run something that he's been doing for 5 years because he trusts me.
And no one else could do it. You were literally the only person who could do it. And I can say that absolutely for 100% fact.
Well, thank you for saying that. So I took that encouragement from Tom, and I was like, all right, I think I can do this. I think I can make something of this. And that's what I'm doing. So we kicked that off in November. And we built like a prototype on Cloudflare for the first month because we actually weren't sure. I was saying, okay, we're going to try this new thing, built a prototype, and it actually blew our minds. The implementation was better than what we thought it would be. And in March, I think we released it, or February. No, it was March. So it's pretty early still, but we're not far from 1.0. It feels.
It's a good time to do it in March because the original one launched in March, so it's been exactly 5 years.
Yeah. I love that, that it was, the timing is so similar, and March happens to be my birthday, so that's nice.
Awesome, man. This is super exciting. I'm just hyped that you're back in it, building the framework, and you're like fired up and hyped about it. Because I feel like when you kind of went away from the project, it was like this huge epic thing that you had built, and that all these people were kind of like trying to make work and maintain, and like had different pieces of knowledge about it. But there felt like a kind of disconnect there. And it's not like anything you did wrong. It was just kind of like, it was a complicated project, So it's really having someone who can just like drive the framework is so important.
Yeah. And, I actually haven't written the majority of code in the framework this time around. It's a person named Justin van der Merwe.
Because there are other people who are doing this with you. We should highlight any of them if there's more than them.
Yeah. So we have Justin. We have a guy named Herman, myself, and then we also have Amy, who was
still in it,
yeah. She created this awesome video about personal software. She created a tutorial. She's also building shareware.dev, and she has a really good taste when it comes to things in the framework. So all of us are incredibly aligned in what we're building, and it feels like. I just feel super privileged to be able to do this every day, and I don't take that lightly.
Love to hear what you're building, Peter. Is contagious and glad to watch it unfold. I agree.
Definitely.
I think I'm actually speaking to Ben tomorrow.
Nice.
Yeah, Ben is a tutor for. What are you you're a tutor for? Like some kind of really popular video tutorial thing. My brain is cooked. Egghead. There we go.
Egghead's sweet.
Yeah, we actually would love to build an Egghead course. So.
Yeah, I'm sure Joel will be excited about that as well. I'm supposed to do some sort of podcast with him as well at some point. We probably want to talk about Redwood as well. Another funny thing that I got reminded of was you made a tweet a couple of days ago about talking about React and a lot of its issues and how we need to kind of just not look at the bad stuff that's happening and just embrace the good, like the stuff that's good about it. And I made a funny comment on it, I believe, because I've been doing this thing recently, especially with like Adam Rackis posts about React, where I try to put it under like, the stages of grief. So I think under your tweet, I called it like, this is stage 5 acceptance.
Yeah, I laughed. That was really good. Oh geez,
spam alert.
Okay, lock it in.
Spam on
brother.
Kick.
That's funny.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I mean, there's people. Remix has very clearly declared that they don't want to do React anymore. Tanner's been pretty happy with Solid recently. I guess. Yeah. I'm excited to figure out if Redwood if Redwood is like completely tied to React, or if it's possible to like have a different rendering flavored, like a solid flavored Redwood or a Vue flavored Redwood.
I don't know enough about those other rendering frameworks to even speculate about what that would look like. I think the source of that tweet was that when we were coding JavaScript back in the early 2000s or late 2010s or whatever, it sucked. It was really difficult. It was difficult to reason about. You never really quite knew what you were doing because browser vendors implemented things way differently. There were no transpilers. And then this person wrote a book, Douglas Crockford, wrote a book called JavaScript, The Good Parts. And that book was amazing because it was like 100 pages. And it basically said, JavaScript has really good parts and really bad parts. I'm going to point out only the good parts. And from now on, ignore everything else and just focus on this. And you read that book and you were like, I get it. Finally. So I want to do the same thing for React. It's like, okay, we've gone through a lot of paradigms, client side, server side. Now we're in this new phase. There are things in the framework that just don't make sense anymore. They probably, like, you could feel them when they came out. So we have to move away from those. And
synthetic events.
Let's point out what the good stuff is. And just use those. So I'm excited for the future of React. I think it has, it taught me a lot about architecting front-end code because everything else before it was a complete shit show. Angular was terrible. jQuery was awesome, but it also it had the same problem. Like they all surfaced the same issue. So you never knew exactly where things were and how things happen on the screen. And yeah. But I got to try some of these other newer ones because I have never actually tried them.
Let me know if I can give you a tour of Solid at some point. And that must be
fun. We should do that.
Yeah, man. I'll do another stream in like a month or two or whenever you got the time. This is super fun, and there's a million things we could talk about. But thank you so much. Really great to get this huge download, and I'm excited. I think I'm gonna be building on this now.
Cool. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation too, and I felt like I rambled on for quite a bit. So
yours is cool. So I'm about to run this through Auto Show, and you're gonna be able to read a summary of it where you sound like you knew exactly what you were talking about the whole time.
Awesome. That's what I love. AI makes me sound smart. Actually, I want to do a shout out for this one tool that I use. It's called Whisperflow, I think.
Flow? Yeah, it uses Whisper CPP under the hood.
So it's this really decent thing that you have on your computer that allows you to basically transcribe text. So you hold in your function key if you're using a Mac, and it picks up what you said, and then it changes it into text. So I don't type very fast. I've never been someone that can. And what I realized is when I type, I sound stupid. But when I speak, I sound less stupid. So this thing takes my voice and actually puts it into words, and it does all the spelling really well and proper grammar and cleans it up for me. It's great. I really enjoy using it. I enjoy communicating with people using my voice rather than my typing. So check that out.
Nice. I think I have the opposite problem. I feel like I sound smarter when I'm writing down things.
Nah, you are quite intimidating. I was so worried to come on the show, and I was like, Dev's gonna.
Bro,
Dev's
when I
gonna
met Dev, he was still a college student.
Even then, he was intimidating. I was like, "Whoa, that guy's smart." Yeah.
I think I was a college
That's
student when
cool.
Peter and I first met as well, as a Jamstack Conf, the last one ever.
Yeah. I think I even gave you like some swag, or I tried to convince you that Snaplet was awesome, and you were like, "Nah, dude, that thing's. I don't know what you're doing with that. It's dumb." I was like, "Ah, shit." I actually couldn't sleep that night. I was like, "Damn, call my product stupid." No, I'm kidding.
He was like, "I love leaking all my customers' personal data."
I probably have a Snaplet sticker somewhere still.
Well, this Bronify said doing the weave is a crowd service. What does that mean?
I think he's talking. I think this is something that they talk about. Trump doing the weave in terms he weaves around a conversation. I think that might be what he's referencing. I'm not 100% positive.
Oh shit! This guy's comparing me to Trump.
I don't think he meant it as an insult.
I won't take it as an insult right now, this very moment. Cool,
man. All right, App Factory on X. That's how people can find you.
Yeah.
And then RWSDK.com. Those are the places.
Yes, and please star our GitHub repo. That's going to convert into sweet money at some point.
Yeah, let me do that. We're at 766. All right, everyone watching this right now, go star it. Do it now.
Yeah.
All right. We should call it here. You get to bed with your baby, and yeah, man, we'll be in touch.
Cool. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, everyone in the stream who was hanging out. Super fun.